Welcome to the Equip for Life podcast. Two things you might be noticing right off the bat. First of all, I am not Josh. In case you hadn't noticed, this is not normally the voice that you hear opening this podcast, right? Josh is actually here. Say hi, Josh.
Hi.
He's just behind the camera this time, not in front of the camera. I am getting the joy of hosting this podcast. This is my very first Equip for Life podcast, getting to host it by myself. So I'm pretty excited. I hope that you're excited. I'm Emily, in case you hadn't already figured that out. Speaker, writer, coach at ERI. You've heard me on many podcasts before, but I'm here and I get to do this one today. So I'm very excited about that. Second thing, if you're watching this podcast right now, you might have noticed that we are not in the studio, or maybe you can hear that through the audio. It's not quite the same audio that we normally have, right? So we're actually in Washington, D.C. because it is the March for Life. I don't know when you're listening to this podcast, but right now it is the March for Life. It's actually happening tomorrow, and we are in our Airbnb. And so we wanted to get a little bit of filming done while we were in Washington, D.C., because we have some very awesome people with us right now in D.C. that we wouldn't normally get to have all in the same room. So first of all, we have Jacob Nels with us, speaker, Sidewalk counselor at ERI. He is awesome. You've heard him on the podcast many times before, so we're very excited to have him with us here at the March. And then we have one of my favorite people in the world with us, Meredith Maloli. You have heard me talk about her before. If you've know anything about my story of how I get into pro-life work, how I started working for ERI, Meredith is a huge part of that story. She was the co-president of Olaf for Life with me at St. Olaf College. We went through that whole epic transformation story of resurrecting a club from extinction, more or less, at St. Olaf. And she is actually the one who convinced me to go to my very first pro-life club meeting. So I can quite honestly say if Meredith hadn't been there, I don't know if I ever would have gone. I don't know if I'd be working for ERI or if I'd ever gotten into doing pro-life things. So Meredith and I go way back. We are actually now roommates, so it's really fun. We live together post-college, and she is the client services director at the Northfield Women's Center, which is the wonderful life-affirming pregnancy center in Northfield, Minnesota. She also works as a club coach for ERI. If you know anything about our affiliate group program, we have club coaches who work with each of our clubs, and she is one of them. So maybe right now you're in one of the clubs that Meredith coaches and you're listening to this podcast. So get excited. Meredith is here. Say hi, Meredith.
Hello, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. Really excited.
Fantastic. Well, I wanted to have you both on the podcast today.
Which is the first time you and I have been on a podcast together.
That's true. We have never been on a podcast together. Woo, high five.
And I just met Meredith yesterday. Well, we talked on the phone.
Yep.
You got a save from the last time we talked, which is awesome.
Yes.
So, I'm sorry, I'm throwing off your rhythm.
No, you're totally fine, Jacob. Talk. You're supposed to. This is a podcast.
Well, that's what I'm doing. I'm talking right now.
Okay, well, anyways. I wanted to have you both on the podcast to talk a little bit about pregnancy centers, talking to abortion-minded or abortion-vulnerable women, and basically what kind of the average pro-life person who's maybe gone through the rest of ERI's materials, they know a little bit about apologetics, they know what to say in maybe conversations with pro-choice people, but they want to know more about how to talk well about pregnancy centers, how to think well about pregnancy centers. Like, what should the average pro-life person who maybe knows the rest of ERI's content know about that sphere? Because I think Meredith's story is decently common. There's a lot of people who will do pro-life work maybe in a high school pro-life group or a college pro-life group, and then when they become an adult, they want to still keep doing things in the pro-life movement, and so they start volunteering with a pregnancy center, or they start working for a pregnancy center, in Meredith's case. And so I know that both of you work a lot with kind of that population. You know, Meredith working in a pregnancy center, Jacob working a lot with pregnancy centers through your sidewalk counseling, and so I want to kind of give the average pro-life person a view into that world and what that is like. So first question, Meredith, I know that you had a lot of experience doing like ERI-style outreaches. So how does that like translate into the work that you do now? Like what is similar? How did that help you? Did that actually help you?
I think it really did help me to have that basic background just in pro-life apologetics and in talking to pro-choice college students, which can sometimes be scary. So to have sort of the guts and the experience to have had those conversations and to know some of the common responses, I think was really helpful. But I don't necessarily use a lot of the arguments part of it in my work day to day. Because when a woman comes into the pregnancy center and she might be facing an unplanned pregnancy, her disposition and where she's at is very different from that pro-choice college student that I was talking to. She's in it.
Were you expecting that when you went
I don't know.
from the
I don't know what
university
I
to there?
expected.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
Were you surprised you weren't having any philosophical discussions with the people walking in, or you?
I wasn't super surprised.
Okay.
Because a lot of my training before I started my position actually and started working with clients was about that crisis moment,
Okay.
right? And a lot of times with college students, we're in philosophy land, right? We're doing thought experiments.
Right.
We are exploring the edges. And in that moment, she is just right there, like deer in the headlights. What am I going to do? And so we're really talking about her. You know, where is she at in life? What are her values? What brought her here? And how can we walk alongside her in this? And so we might talk a little bit about, you know, the biology of the unborn, and we might talk a little bit about, you know, she's probably this far along based on LMP, last menstrual period. So then we can talk a little bit about development and what resources are available to her, and talk about any questions she might have about her options. We'll talk about abortion. You know, has she thought about that before? What does she know about abortion? We'll talk about adoption. What does she know about adoption? Often the first reaction I get to saying, you know, what do you know about adoption is, oh, well, I could never do that.
Amazing how often we come across that.
That was surprising to me.
Isn't it? Yeah,
I
me
did
too.
not expect that.
Yeah.
But it makes total sense. That's kind of the, I don't know if it's the attitude we have, but almost every person's first reaction is like, oh my gosh, I could never do that.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it's really nice to use that time to say, okay, maybe you would never consider adoption, but what do you know about it? Because I think it's important to talk about what it is today versus what it might have been in the past.
Oh, that's a good point.
And so
Yeah.
if you have any friends, you know, in the future that might be considering adoption, you can help to talk to them about this and maybe share a little bit of this information. And so then we'll go through each of those options and talk about their resources. And so it's very different from the conversations that you have on college campuses, because in college campus discussions, there's a bit of back and forth. You know, you're really listening and you're empathizing with their position, but you're also getting a chance to respond and say, well, this is what I believe. And in that appointment, I'm not doing that at all. In that appointment, it's about her and her values and giving her a space to really be heard
Okay.
with no, you know, outside pressures or expectations.
So Jacob, I'm curious, is that similar to your experience? I know you did a lot of, you know, college campus style outreach before going and doing work on the sidewalk. So how is that? Do you agree with most of what Meredith was saying? Like, I saw you nodding a lot. So is that?
Yeah, I think Meredith is a lot more aware of the shift. I wasn't.
Okay.
I thought I've done a lot of outreach at a lot of different universities, and I'll just translate that to the sidewalk. And so I went to the sidewalk to do sidewalk counseling. And the first day I didn't use any of it. It just wasn't appropriate at the time. And then the second day I didn't use any. And I went for years and basically didn't ever use anything. The only time I have talked philosophy and the kind of conversation I would have on a university is when someone has come up angry that has nothing to do with the abortion clinic.
Oh, sure. They
Like a
just like saw
passerby
you sidewalk
is like-
counseling.
Yeah. How dare you be here
Right.
infringing? And it's like, oh, okay, we can have a conversation, you know, which I don't turn away.
Sure.
But yeah, to piggyback on what you were saying, Meredith, I compare it to, like, in my experience, the best analogy I've come up with is it's like when you're at the university or you're talking to a pro-choice person that's not in crisis, you're looking at a burning building. And you're talking about, like, how should we put that fire out? What would be the best thing to do? What should be our strategy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Versus when you're talking to someone who is pregnant, they're in the building and you're trying to get in there with them and try to talk about how are we going to get out of this emergency situation?
Right.
What are we going to do to help you get out of here? It's almost like you're on the radio with them or something.
Yeah.
And they're just in it. It's just a different conversation. They're panicking. They're rightfully so, and you have to calm them down first.
Right.
Which isn't always the case on the university. You can
Right.
relate to them and then move on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was surprised at how different the conversations were.
Right.
Sure. So I have this perception in my head that it makes total sense to me that a abortion-minded or abortion-vulnerable woman wouldn't be interested in hearing your philosophical argument against abortion. Like that tracks for me. But I feel like there's probably at least some women in that camp who might be interested or like asking questions about the biology of the unborn, which isn't the kind of conversation we usually have on a college campus, but it is in the ERI material of like things that you learn to go to there. Are there abortion-minded women that are interested in that, asking those questions, wanting to know, is this a baby, those kinds of things? Or are they really only focused usually on what's going on in their own lives?
I don't have to think about that answer, but I want to hear yours first.
Okay. I think most of I've never heard the question like, is it a baby? Like that has never come out of a client's mouth for me. Maybe it will someday. I have heard, oh my gosh, before I knew I was pregnant, I was drinking last weekend, and is that going to hurt the baby? I've heard that. Even though they're considering abortion, that's something on their mind. Or, has the heartbeat started yet, right? Like, where am I at in development? And it's more concerned about, like, this is what's going on in my life, and I'm not sure what I'm going to do about this yet, but not necessarily, is this a baby? Because most of the time the language they're using, they're saying baby. Was the drinking from last weekend, is that going to hurt the baby? Or, when we talk about, how are you going to look back on this 5 years from now? If I have an abortion, I won't have my baby with me, but maybe I'll get to do this other thing. And so that's the language that they're using a lot of times says, I know this is a baby, or at least at some point,
at some point it will be a baby. It's a potential baby.
Yes. And so they're not, on college campus, we're really careful to talk about fetus and whatever, use this neutral language. That's not the language my clients are using, because they are in it. They're not worried about these little nuances of language. They're like, this is how I'm thinking and feeling about this, so that's what's going to come out.
Interesting. Do you ever have clients not use the baby language and use the more fetus, clump of cells-y, kind of things that we hear on campuses?
More often, they just won't talk about a baby, rather than switch to the more neutral language. So I will stick with the neutral language, or I'll mirror what they're using. And our sonographer, who does ultrasounds, will talk about the pregnancy, and not necessarily refer to baby when we don't know where a client is at. But it's really, I've never had a client switch to that neutral language. It's more avoiding talking about the baby and more focused on everything going on right there in that moment.
Yeah, that's been my experience. I've never discussed biology. It's always been like, yes, I'm pregnant with a baby.
It's just it's a known fact, or at least more or less.
I say that sounds really confidently, but there is like this disconnect of, this is really hard to explain because it doesn't make sense. I'm pregnant with a baby, but it's not here yet. It doesn't exist yet, but I am pregnant with a baby. And I know that makes no sense, what I'm saying, but it's an emotional kind of disconnect. And that's probably something you guys work on, and that I talk to out in front of the abortion clinic is I'll say, okay, it sounds like we disagree on something. You're saying you're not ready to be a mom. And I hear you. I think you're probably right. You're not really ready. This is probably not the best timing for you. The one thing I would disagree with you on is I think you're already a mom. You just can't hold your baby yet, but it's here. And so in my mind, where do you want to go from there? And that's a light bulb moment, a switch, a big switch. Very often they go, oh, you're right. The baby's here. I guess that does make me a mom. I'm just not, not able. But to connect those dots is really important. And so that's why I point out there's those differences, but they haven't put it together yet. Because they're in such crisis mode. We don't think well when we're in crisis, right? I don't.
No.
So we try to prepare before the crisis, but if we haven't really prepared for it, which is a lot of the people I see coming out of the abortion clinic, they haven't really thought this through. And they're just reacting to an emergency situation to move forward.
I think that's really interesting, Jacob, because I kind of do that same thing, but in a little bit different way. I'll talk about how, in this moment, there's not really any going back. If that pregnancy test is positive, abortion is not going to somehow make that not a reality. That you're pregnant. You are currently pregnant. And so regardless of what you choose, your life is going to be changed. So abortion has this sort of sheen or myth, I think, around it that it's a do-over.
It just gets rid of the problem. It can
make this go away.
It's a really great point.
And I can go back. But I think it's really, really important to say no. That point of no return
you're right. That's a good point.
has been passed, and you have a decision to make. Whatever decision you make is going to be with you for the rest of your life. So you want to make sure that you are at peace with that. So I think it's sort of in line with what you're saying. Of like,
Divulge
you
a
can't
little
go back.
bit, but
Right.
yeah.
But the line of, you can't just go back.
Yeah.
What it's ahead of you.
No, I think this is really important distinction, what you're doing there, which is really important, is you're helping her do self-preservation as well.
Yes.
Because she's looking at her future. What is this going to affect? And you're talking about the effect of this pregnancy on her life and what it's she's already there. Which I think you're right. That is something we should focus on. And then I'm curious if you do shift to, because I make an intentional shift to go to bonding with the child. I'm trying to get them to bond with the child, which is one of the reasons I have a hard time with adoption, is because in order to save the kid, I usually am trying to get them to bond with the child, and then they bond with the child, and then they're like, well, of course I don't want to.
Sure, right. Because at that point, they've got that relationship going there. Okay.
No, I would say it's definitely different from what you're doing on the sidewalk. Because, and I don't know if this is all pregnancy resource centers or just our experience, is we've been burned quite a few times by the community, by college students, really attacking our center.
Okay.
And so we are very careful.
What do you mean by attacking? When you say like attacking your center?
Yeah, I guess there's a couple examples that come to mind. The one that was probably most dramatic, I will say, is we had our banquet, our annual banquet at one of the local colleges, and we had students lined up protesting, yelling at our donors as they're walking in.
Wow.
Talking about how you hate women and all this stuff.
Kind of awkward for the donors.
A little bit awkward.
Super awkward.
I've got some donors that would write bigger checks because of that.
I think it did backfire a little bit on the protesters.
So how many protesters are we talking here? Are we talking 2 or 3? Are we talking...
No, we're talking like from both campuses, I would say 20 to 30.
Oh, pretty good crowd.
Yeah, because it's not just the pro-choice group that will show up for something like this. The pro-choice group will, say, "Hey, this is going on. We really need to take action." And so, we had a bunch of students show up with signs, and there was one. There was like the last person walking in, and it was one of our employees. She goes up to she's just reading the signs, watching him. She goes, he looks at his watch. He goes, "So are we done here yet?" Like.
Oh, wow. Okay, so what I'm hearing is there aren't that many of these protesters that are that motivated.
Yeah, there are some that are very motivated, and there are some that are like, I showed up to this thing because it was like the thing to do.
Right.
Maybe I thought that girl was really cute and she was selling, but like, are we done yet?
Wow.
Yeah. Lots of reviews online from people who have never been to our center. Fake clinic, all this stuff. They trick women. And we still do fight a perception among the townspeople who just, saw all this controversy and didn't necessarily bother to come find out the truth. With that being said, they did deal with fake clients, before my time.
Okay. You haven't dealt with any during your time?
Not that I'm aware of.
Right.
But it doesn't really matter because I'm not going to treat them any differently than I would, an actual client. And so, I just know that has definitely had an effect on our policies and just how we do things. And so my role in that room is really all about her and saying, how can we help you and support you in this moment? And how can I, as this neutral party, help you to step outside of this crisis mode and look long term? And so we look in depth at each of her options. How do you feel about this aspect? What are some positives? What are some negatives? And I just write down everything that she says. And that is so much, I think that is so much more powerful for them because it's then their words being read back to them. You said when you were talking about this option of parenting, what would be a positive? Well, I would get to have my baby. Those are your words.
Sure.
And if I have an abortion, I know I'll regret it. Probably almost immediately.
Wow.
Word for word. Okay. I'm just writing that down. And what we've seen is that is so much more lasting change of heart because they're like, this is actually what I want. And I've had the time and space to sit back and honestly look and think about this. And we'll talk about, are there people in your life who are going to support you in your decision? Are there people in your life who are going to try to influence you to do something else? And
how much of a factor would you say that influences her decision,
I
her
would
support
say
system?
that is so key. That is huge.
Yeah.
That is huge.
Yeah.
And identifying that support system. Because maybe she hasn't realized all the support she has in her life until she sits down and thinks about it and names people.
Okay.
Like, I have this person who would step in and help me out.
Okay.
And that maybe wasn't obvious before, but I've had clients who we have, this big, long appointment. We go through everything, and at the end of it, they're pretty sure they're going to have an abortion. And so they leave the center. I'm thinking of one particular client now. But she calls back a week later and she said, I talked to my grandma and she said she really thought I could do this. And so I'm going to have the baby.
Wow.
And I was just I was so shocked. I was like, wow, we went through all of these things,
Sure.
she had really made up her mind. And it was just one person in her corner that she trusted who said, I really think you can do this. And I will be here for you.
Wow.
And from that point forward, she was so excited.
Yeah.
So that's been really amazing to see. If they don't have that one person to really support them in their life, and sometimes we are that person as the center. Sometimes they don't have anyone else who would support them, but they want to choose life, and they just need to know that there are people who care about them and who will walk with them. And that's why we exist.
Yeah, I think it's one of, if not the most important thing, is for them to have one solid support system.
Yeah.
And I've been amazed at how many times I've been talking to a young woman or a woman, and she's been like, I don't have a system. My parents are going to kick me out. I'll be on the streets. It's over. And it's like, okay. If I get you a place to stay, would that change things? Yeah, that's the one thing I'm really worried about is a place to stay, and maybe they name a few other things. Like, okay, no problem. I've got people waiting to take you in, nice apartment kind of thing in their house, and so let me make some phone calls. We get that going. I call them, get it all arranged, and then I tell this woman, and she then tells her parents or mom or dad, whatever it is, and she's like, you know what? They're not going to kick me out.
But she just needed to know that support system was there, so she'd have the guts to actually tell them.
That's right.
Wow.
And then once she told them and they're not going to kick, then she's like, okay, then I can do this.
Yeah.
It's good.
Wow.
So it's been neat to see that kind of thing. So then I have to call the host and be like, yeah, so thank you. I know that you're really preparing for this young lady, and she's not coming.
Wow. But she is having the baby.
Right, but she's having the baby.
What you did actually made a difference in her making that decision.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow. So when you say support system, it doesn't sound to me like that really matters that much who it is, as long as she knows there is someone, whether that's the center or a friend or a family member or someone in her church. Like, as long as she knows there is someone who's going to be there for her that she trusts, it seems to matter less who that is. Is that fair? Is that accurate? Like, can an average pro-life person who's volunteering for a center be that person for an abortion-minded woman?
Well, I think they can. They've got to build the rapport with them.
Sure.
So the advantage is if you've got somebody that you've got a lot of rapport with, then you know you can count on them. So there's security there. Yeah. And I'll also say this. The support system doesn't have to be wealthy or affluent. Right. It's not that they're putting financial investment into this. It's more of, and in my experience, I want to hear from you, Meredith, but it's an emotional support system just saying, you can do this. I'll walk alongside you. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be giving them anything.
Right. Yeah.
Just giving them that emotional support. What's been your experience, Meredith?
I think that's so key. That client that I was talking about earlier, that her grandmother had told her she could do this. She still calls us. She doesn't come in for classes, really. She doesn't need diapers, wipes, some of that material support, but she'll just call and we'll chit chat for like 30 minutes, 45 minutes, just like, this is the update, this is what's going on.
Oh, that's awesome.
You know, this person is being so irritating right now. And we'll just have that catch up because there's that understanding that, you know, she's got a lot going on in her life and we are here for her. And if she just needs to call and vent, great. I am more than happy to be that person for her. And if there's things along the way that we can help her with, we'll do that.
Okay.
So this last summer, she had some medical appointments that she needed to go to, and her son, for whatever reason, was not in summer school. She has a child who's school age. And so we sent him to the YMCA camp for 2 weeks. So
nice.
she could have time to get those appointments done and get him in. And that just meant the world to her. So to have that support, and I think that's why she still keeps in contact. She'll just call in. It'll be just random. Hey, Meredith, she's on the phone for you.
That's awesome. Okay.
So yeah, I think that's so important because maybe they don't have anyone else to talk to.
Okay.
Maybe they have a child already or a couple of children. Sometimes there's a partner in the picture. But to have another adult just say, I understand, I hear you, and we're here for you, I think makes all the difference.
So let me ask you a question that I ask people who work at PRCs, and we haven't prepped for this.
Fun. All right.
And it's always been the same answer. And I've always, I originally, when I was asking this question, I was surprised.
Okay.
So as far as the general public, you got people who are pro-life, curious about what you guys do.
Yeah.
And how open are you guys to them stopping by or setting an appointment to get a tour?
Love it. Yeah.
Same answer every time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, but I want our pro-life people out there to know that because most pro-life people are like, they're so busy and they don't have time and I don't want to bother them and I don't want to like disturb something. I may walk in there when they have like an abortion-minded person and I'll mess something up and then that person will go have an abortion. It'll be my fault. It's like, calm down. Just calm down. You're not that influential. So you really should just give them a call and be like, hey, my name's so-and-so. I appreciate the work you guys are doing. I'd love to come see what you're about so I can tell my friends.
Yes.
And I have never heard a PRC go, oh, we don't do that.
Yeah, no, we would love that. Yeah, no, so important because then we can not only say, you know, this is our facility, this is what it's like, but also, do you have any questions about what we do?
Right.
Have you heard anything from your friends or the community that you're concerned about and you want to talk through with us? Because that's often the place where those misconceptions get addressed.
Yeah.
And we have a chance to like actually go through them and then they can go tell their friends like, hey, these guys are not scary.
Right.
They're really fun and nice and sometimes we've actually had people, you know, stop by and get a tour and then they want to volunteer, which is great. We so appreciate that. So no, really important. And we have had some people in the community because of our neutral name that thought we did abortions. And so it wasn't until they came in and talked to us that they realized, oh, you guys don't actually do abortions here. And so, hey, I want to support you. Because if you'd really looked at our website or if you had talked to any of us, you would know that. But if you just see the outside of the building and you don't ever go in,
you might think
maybe
Northfield Women's Center, like what is this? They could be an abortion clinic.
What is this thing? And so we had a woman who, she lived in town for like 30 years and would walk by us on her way to the library. And now she volunteers for us doing our baby boutique.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Which is amazing.
Which is quite different than an abortion clinic.
Right.
Yes.
Quite different.
If you're pro-choice and reasonable, we'd love for you to come in and have a conversation, and we have no problem with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, and I'm so glad you brought that up because this is something I say over and over again to members of the community. I'd say it on college campuses, is that pregnancy resource centers should be neutral ground. It should be something both pro-life people and pro-choice people can get behind because we are all about supporting women. And so it's really too bad that, you know, there's a perception out there that it's only, you know, for pro-life people or whatever, because I think it really should be for both.
Yeah. There's definitely this negative stereotype that a lot of pro-choice people, I think, have in their heads. I've talked to many on college campuses who think they know what a pregnancy center does. They have a lot of myths around it. And pro-life people often like to bring up pregnancy centers in conversations. If you get like a, pro-lifers are only pro-birth type of accusation. Sure. I've done it many times. I've seen many other pro-life people bring it up, be like, well, if we were only pro-birth, pregnancy centers would not exist because they do all of these things. So I want to ask you, like, if you're an average pro-life person listening to this podcast and someone asks you about a PRC or you want to bring it up in a conversation, how would you explain what a pregnancy center is to a pro-choice person to like help dispel some of those myths? And then maybe we can break down those myths specifically, but just kind of like overview. How do you explain what a pregnancy center is effectively?
A pregnancy center usually offers the following services: free pregnancy tests, limited obstetrical ultrasounds, and sometimes free STI and STD testing and treatment. And so that's kind of the medical side of things that are all provided to clients at no cost to them. And then even the smallest PRC has some sort of baby boutique: diapers, wipes, clothes. And most PRCs have much more than that because people in the community donate clothes, they donate equipment, high chairs, cribs, the works. And so it's really a place where people can come and get support with their pregnancy, whether it's a crisis pregnancy or not. Maybe they just are, we've had a couple of really young couples that don't have a lot of resources and just need some help. And that's great. We are more than happy to provide that.
And you don't even have to be pregnant. It sounds like if you're doing STD, STI testing, like it's not even just for pregnant individuals. Anyone could come in and receive some of those services at least.
Right. And so, for example, if you have a negative pregnancy test, that's one of the services that we might follow up with depending on, screening and history. It's a really good idea to get tested because there are some STIs that can be in the system, not detected, and wreak havoc on your reproductive system. And so you might not know till 5-10 years down the road where you're actually trying to have kids that, hey, I contracted this STI in college and now I can't have kids because it went untreated, because I didn't know. And so it's really huge, I think, to have people get treated and tested because especially for women, it can be very harmful. And women often don't have symptoms. So you could be carrying chlamydia, gonorrhea, and not know it. So those are generally the things that pregnancy resource centers do and provide judgment-free support, right? So when a client comes in and they might be facing a crisis pregnancy, an unplanned pregnancy, we'll have a pregnancy test and then we'll talk about all of their options as we've discussed, right? And just give them the space to really think through it. And then go through, these are the resources available to you. What can we help you with? I've helped many a client get health insurance. They'll come in and, they're positive pregnancy tests, but they don't have health insurance. So, how do I go to the doctor if I don't have health insurance? Well, in Minnesota, if you're pregnant, you automatically qualify for medical assistance. And so let's get that started for you. You don't have to worry about, not having medical care during your pregnancy. So another thing that we offer that many centers in Minnesota do actually is life coaching.
Okay, what's life coaching? I know what life coaching is because I live with you, but help our listeners. What is life coaching?
It's often easier to start with what life coaching is not. Life coaching is not counseling. It's not therapy. It's not expert-driven, as we would say. The client is the expert in their own life. And so life coaching is a space for them to think and dream about the future and have someone to hold them accountable to those goals. And so it can really be what you make of it. But that's often where we'll go with our negative pregnancy tests is, okay, something brought you here today, right? It was you thought you might be pregnant. But there were lots of things leading up to you coming in here. What of those things, are you totally happy with? And what changes do you want to make in your life? What changes do you need help making? Where do you want to be, in the future? And how can we figure out what it takes to get there? And so it's a way to offer support beyond the medical side of things that we do. That's really whole person oriented. We care about you.
Even for the people who aren't pregnant. They just got a negative pregnancy test and you're still wanting to help them in several more appointments.
Yes, even for you, because you are a person who could be back here in a month or 2 months.
Sure.
If something doesn't change. And so how can we help you, walk alongside you to live the best life that you possibly can, to be the best person that you want to be? Because everyone wants to grow. Everyone wants to be a better version of themselves. And so how can we walk alongside you to help make that happen? So that's something that a lot of pregnancy resource centers are doing, and coaches in the city, like actual outside of pregnancy center life coaches, they charge like $150 over $200 for an hour session.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It is, it's huge in the cities. You know, people get business coaches, they get, you know, executive leadership coaches.
Sure. But you're offering
That's the kind of training that we're getting.
Wow.
But we're just offering it to our clients as part of our services to say, you know, we care about you and we want the best for you.
Yeah.
And so if you want to take advantage of this service and really grow and, you know, learn, then we're here for you.
Sure. So I'm curious, Jacob, how is this similar or different to how you would explain what a pregnancy center does, say, on the sidewalk? Like, we're talking about how Meredith would explain it to just an average town person who's maybe confused about what the center does. How would you explain it to an abortion-minded woman who you're trying to maybe get to go to a PRC?
Yeah, so I don't sugarcoat things.
Sure.
I'm like, let's be honest here for a second. You don't want to be here. I know, I understand you feel like you have to be here. This is not where you want to be in life.
Sure.
You did not 5 years ago say, I think I'm going to have an abortion planned in my 5-year
Yeah, no
goals.
one's doing that.
that never happened.
Yeah.
So clearly you're in a position right now where you don't want to be.
Okay.
So let's have a different conversation. Let's have a conversation about where you want to get and how you want to get there.
Okay.
And what I'm not going to do is give you a handout. That's never going to happen. But I'm going to introduce you to people, and we're going to give you a hand up. Because everyone at some point in their life needs a hand up. Sure. And let's be frank, right now, I think you need that. I think you need to get out of the ditch you're in right now, because you're in a bad place.
Yeah.
And so how about I introduce you to some friends of mine? That's how I refer to the PRCs.
I love it.
And we have like a real conversation about where you are right now and where you want to be and how we can get you there. So you're not doing this alone anymore. Because let's be honest, you're beat up. You're worn out. You're done. I can see it in your face.
Right.
You're barely hanging on here. So how can we get you the support system to get to where you need to be? I don't know what the problems are that you're looking at. The one thing I know is I know the people who want to help get you out of it.
Okay.
And we can get you out. Whatever your need is, we can find a thing for that. And I say that with confidence because I've just never come across a situation that's not like, oh yeah, we can fix that. I mean, I'll get off on a little tangent. I had one time this woman, she was from China. She got pregnant by an airplane pilot. As soon as he found out she was pregnant, he ditched her.
Yep.
And was like, well, you have to have an abortion because if you go back to China with this child or you go back to China pregnant, I mean, all these horrible things can happen. So now she's like, and you don't have anywhere to go. You don't have anywhere to live. So I got in touch with her, and she did not want to have an abortion from the get-go. But she genuinely felt like this was something she was going to have to do.
Right.
She's going back to China. They're going to force her into an abortion there, or she's going to have one here. So what's her options? So I said, okay, hold on. Clearly, so we got our legal counsel, got that straightened out, got her visa extended. She got a student visa, no problem. And then I found her housing, and within a few hours of taking her to her housing, the host home, within 24 hours, the host home was like, I'm sorry, we just don't have a good feeling about this. I just don't think this is gonna work. So now I'm back to square one, I got nothing.
Oh boy, okay.
I can honestly tell you I did not break a sweat. I was like, no problem, no problem. It's not my problem, it's God's problem. He'll figure it out. So I made a couple more phone calls and boom, had her another place. Wow. An even better place, actually. It just it actually worked out better. So, from that to transportation to just whatever. We have an awesome group of people who want to help these families. Yep. And I mean, we're at, last I looked, it's 4 times the amount of crisis pregnancy centers as there are abortion clinics. Last time I looked at the numbers, and I think it's actually higher than that now. So we're a 4-to-1 got them outnumbered. We just have to leverage those resources that we have. And it's so easy to call some people and be like, hey, look, the PRC's a little maxed out maybe or whatever. We need to get this person these things and help them get through that. Now I'll put a caveat in there. The abortion-minded person should have one person that they're running everything through. And I really like the PRC to be that resource, because they've got the coaching and everything, because we've had situations where we are so generous with them that they're having one kid and they have 4 cribs, enough diapers for 2 kids for 3 years.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
3 or 4 strollers.
Yeah.
Like they have a little apartment and they don't even have room for all the brand new stuff that they have. So it's like, we need to run this through. So that's another thing the PRC can do, because we can get that to the PRC and disperse it from there where they get what they actually need and not all this extra stuff.
So if you're a pro-life person listening who has any sort of resources to help a woman in that situation, whether that's the financial resources to buy a crib, or that's space in your home, or that's just the emotional support where you have time to be texting with a client and checking in on how they're feeling today, or help pick up their medication from Walgreens, like if you can connect with your pregnancy center, they may have women that they can connect you to who you can help and do those things for. You don't have to have all the money or all of the space, but you could be a support system, but you should connect with your PRC, is what I'm hearing. And they can help connect you to the women who may need something like that.
I would say most people have some kind of thing they can really help their local PRC out with.
Okay.
At the very least, they can be telling their friends how awesome the PRC is up the road by actually knowing who they are.
Yeah.
Like,
and having been there and toured
nothing.
it, and they've seen it, they've met the people.
But maybe they need help sorting through clothes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe they need help.
You always need help sorting through clothes.
Okay, see? And that's not the most glorified job. But it's so necessary. So when a woman comes in, it's been so awesome to take some of these ladies or families to a pregnancy resource center directly from the abortion clinic. The abortion clinics in Atlanta are always nasty, and this is just a general thing. They're just gross. They don't clean up the sidewalks. There's trash everywhere. We go to a PRC and it's clean. So keeping a clean facility. And
that could just make a big perception difference and make her feel very safe, I would imagine, if she went into that place.
Sweet woman Meredith is there smiling at them with that smile, and they're just like, oh. And then it's like, okay, we're going to get you these things. Here, let me just get you a little starter packet. And they get some brand new clothes. And some diapers and just a little bit. It's what, $10 worth of stuff? Yeah. It's not that much. But to have that all organized and ready to go, they're like, okay, they actually have their stuff together. Like, I think they could help me. You see, this feeds into the support system.
Yes.
And you're helping with that when you go help package up these things, help dispersing information, and maybe if there's volunteering, being a life coach, that's a huge thing. Guys, do not say, don't make me angry here. There's nothing I can do. This is a woman's issue. So many of these women, guess how they got pregnant? It was a guy.
Spoiler alert.
There is such a shortage at every PRC I've talked to, having male coaches, just from man to man. Hey man, you're in a tough spot. Let's talk about where you are, where you want to go. How can I give you some advice to get you there and help hold you accountable?
Yeah.
It's really not that magical, gentlemen.
Right.
Like, you don't know how much helpful influence you have until you've talked to somebody who has never had a loving man in their life, who has never had somebody actually care about where they're going, how they're getting there. Sure. And they're fighting through life just trying to figure out what to do, and they're making horrible decisions that you look at and go, that's a horrible decision.
Right.
But they don't know they just don't know. It's not that they're dumb or anything, they just have never had this. And for you to step in and just be like, hey, we're gonna talk a couple times a week on the phone, and maybe we'll meet up for some coffee or something, and we'll just see where you're going. No, when you go to work, you can't tell your boss that he needs you more than you need them. You know, you can't. You actually have to show up on time.
Yeah. It's
little things like that can make a big difference. So.
Sure.
Yeah, I would agree with we would love to have some more men volunteers. We have an amazing volunteer who does a lot of our facilities work and maintenance. But to have someone who could come in and just talk to the guys while their girlfriend or wife is in the appointment with me, that would be incredible. Because they're going through something too. And to be honest, they don't really want to talk to me.
Right.
Sure.
They want to talk to a guy.
Yeah.
And so if we were able, there are some PRCs who employ male coaches, which is amazing. We're a smaller center. We're not really able to do that, but to get some volunteers who are willing to do that, wow.
Yeah.
That would be amazing.
And see, that's something that is probably a little bit different about the situations you and I run into. I speak to a lot more men. I'm usually talking to the guys because usually it's the woman at the abortion clinic who is in and out. What people don't understand is when somebody goes to the abortion clinic, yes, the actual procedure is like 15 minutes. But they're there for a minimum at most of these clinics of 3 hours, and that's on the low end.
Wow. Okay.
Well, so they're in and out of different they got an ultrasound, they got a counseling thing, and this other thing, and then eventually they'll get to the abortion, and then they'll have some recovery time, and then they leave. Like I said, 3 hours is about the fastest I've seen that happen.
Sure.
So what happened, and usually that woman she's not supposed to drive.
Sure.
So the clinic requires somebody to come in and say, here's my ID, I'm a valid driver, I'm the driver.
Got it.
So it's very often the guy.
Okay.
And is he going to sit inside this clinic for 4 or 5 hours?
No way.
In the waiting room?
I
Especially
wouldn't.
with COVID.
That's exhausting.
But forget COVID, just before that, they're just sitting out. So they're going to sit in the parking lot? Eventually they start getting bored. And so I can start a conversation with a guy, and that's how I can have this conversation with a guy and saying, what do you want? Be a gentleman to her. But does she know what you actually want? Do you want her to have an abortion? And usually the answer is, no, I don't want her to, but it's what she wants. And I said, wait, that's fine. Have you expressed that very clearly? Well, I mean, I told her I'll do whatever. No, that's default. You want her to have an abortion. If you don't say, I want to keep this baby. I want to be a part of this. I want this to happen. Anything short of that is default, I want an abortion. And so it sounds like this is intimidating and crazy for guys. It's not that complicated. It's like, did you talk to her?
Yeah.
What did you say? What do you think she heard? What? Maybe you should say it something like this. Is this accurate to how you feel? We're not very good at expressing what we think and feel.
Sure.
So.
And if a guy explains that to another guy, that's going to come off a little easier. They're going to take that a little better than if Meredith or I tried to explain that to a guy.
And I tell people this, and I'm not saying that this is right. I'm not saying this is fair. I'm just telling you where society is right now.
Sure.
I can say more to a guy than you guys can.
Yeah.
I can say things that is in a way like, man to man, I'm going to challenge you to be a man here and move forward. If you say the exact same thing, and I'm not saying this is the right way to do it, I'm just telling you where we're at. If you say the exact same thing, you're calling him a sissy.
Sure.
And that's just where I've seen a lot of our culture and where we're at.
Sure.
And so we have things that we can do and say, look, man to man, what do you think the right thing? And we can have a different kind of conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love what you said about, have you told her? Because if she doesn't hear those exact words, I want this. I'll be here for you. I'll support you. I don't want you to have an abortion. She's going to fill in the rest.
Yep.
We're really good at that.
Women are really good at filling in the blank.
Yep. Like,
I wouldn't say you're really good at it. I'd say you do it.
We do it. And sometimes it's not an accurate blank, but if there's a blank, you can bet she's filling it in with something.
Yeah, okay. Yep. That's fair.
Yeah. Or even that, that daughter that says, my parents are going to kick me out.
Yeah.
Sure.
There's a lot of assumptions there.
Right.
All of this has happened, maybe whatever is in the past, they're going to kick me out, they're not going to support me. But when she actually has that conversation, a lot of times they are supportive. Oh my gosh. I never would have known that if we hadn't had that direct conversation where they say, we love you and we support you.
Yeah.
And that's totally not what was going on in my head because I'm scared, right? And so what's in my head is the worst. The worst that could happen. And sometimes, when we just say it out loud, then we're like, oh, it's actually not that scary and I can do this.
Yeah. I'm amazed at how often it seems like every time. I talk to a couple, and they have sometimes driven for hours to get to the abortion clinic. And I'll ask them, so have you talked about this? Have you? Nothing. They rode in silence.
That's
They
awkward.
have not talked.
Oh my goodness.
Definitely about this. Just getting them to start talking is a big step. And getting him to start talking, because I think a lot of guys, especially myself, like I process while I'm speaking and while I'm thinking about what I'm going to say, and then I have to think about how I feel about that.
Sure.
And so for a lot of guys, until they're kind of pushed into that direction, they're really not thinking about this so much. They're just reacting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they've been told by society that this is not their thing.
They don't get an opinion.
They don't get an opinion. So
Yeah.
it fits into the, okay, what do you want to do? Okay. And then she goes, okay, he's not sane, so we're going to get an abortion.
Yeah.
And he goes, okay, I'm supportive. And she goes, okay, there's my clarification that that's what he wants to do.
Right.
And people think it's so complicated, and very often it's just, hey man, what do you want?
Yeah.
I'm in front of the abortion clinic. My name's Jacob. Come tell me your story. Now he has to think about, what is my story? What brought you here today? Is this where you want to be? How do you feel about this? And I let them talk.
Yeah.
So.
That's so much of it. Letting them talk.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And process out loud.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. We can't talk anyone out of having an abortion.
No.
They can talk themselves out. We can just give them the truth
Yep.
and give them a support system
Yep.
and let them make the decision. If you do those things, their chances go way up.
Yeah.
Wow. All right, Jacob, I just want to ask a quick clarification on what you just said, because I think it could be taken a couple different ways, and I want to make sure I understand what you meant by it. When you said, you are there to tell them the truth, and they're ultimately going to talk themselves out. I've heard that phrase used a lot. I'm guessing not in the way you meant it. Let me explain for people listening. Ever since we made the Sidewalk Counseling Masterclass, we have gotten the number one question is about how do we, if I'm out here trying to talk to women, be an effective sidewalk counselor, how do I deal with an alternative sidewalk counselor, somebody who is out there doing methods that don't really align with yours, often using bullhorns or large graphic signs, doing things that would definitely fall into the being weird category.
Yeah.
And those people, if you talk to them about their methods and try to say, I'm concerned about what you're doing because women are just going faster into the clinic after they're hearing you, in the bullhorn, and they kind of come back by saying, well, I am just here to proclaim the truth. And whether or not they have an abortion is not really my responsibility. That's not my job to fix. I am just here to tell them the truth.
Yeah.
And it's their job to take that truth. And if they don't, that's their problem. And so when you say that you're trying to help women to find the truth or tell them the truth, what do you mean by that?
Yeah,
I'm guessing it's not the same thing.
That's a really good clarification. Thank you. Let me back that up a little bit.
Okay.
I am under the firm belief, and I can, for my Christian friends, I'll back this up biblically, that rapport is really, really important.
Okay.
I think throughout Christ and how he spoke with us and what he said and how he communicated with people, he used a lot of rapport in there.
Okay.
So, but that's fine. If you're not a Christian and that's not something you believe, I think that you'll agree with me on that rapport is really important. So, for instance, if we're walking down the street and someone comes up to me and says, I don't know what, something just kind of off the wall, some stranger, it really doesn't mean much to me. I don't care.
Sure.
I'll be like, that's interesting. But if you said that, Emily, if you walked up to me and you said, hey, Jacob, there's this thing I would really take that into consideration.
Sure. Because I know we have that relationship.
And we have that, and I'm like, Emily's an upright, honest individual who has my best interest at heart. And if she's telling me this, it's important. I need to make it important. I'd be crazy not to. But that's because we have rapport.
Right.
So if you go to the abortion clinic, there is so much that I can say to abortion-minded people, and they stay and talk to me because I've built rapport with them. That if I just throw it out there, it may or may not be the hook that grabs them to pull them over. Okay. Sometimes it works, and sometimes a blind squirrel finds an acorn.
Right.
But if I can get them to come talk to me, I can build rapport. They can see I'm being genuine. I'm being honest. I'm not lying to them. I'm just being upfront. I'm saying things like we talked about earlier. You're in a bad place. Let's just be honest. This is not where you planned on being. And that is taking them into consideration, going, they're not a horrible person who just wants to have an abortion.
Right.
Okay? So they're like, okay, they're starting to see who I am, what I am, that I don't want to be here, that I'm forced into being here. And so when I say, how far along are you? Can I show you a picture of what your child looks like right now? When I show them that picture and say, so this is what your child looks like right now, they are actually feeling safe and they're receptive to take that information in.
They're open to
versus if I just have it. Because I then go to, I want you to have all the information. And in order to give you all the information, I need to go to the next page. On the next page is a picture of what they're going to do inside there.
Inside the clinic.
Inside the clinic.
Okay.
To your child. This is difficult to look at, but in order for you to have all the information, I have to go to the next page. Can I do that? I get their permission. Now that I have their permission and their rapport, they feel safe. They know that they can tell me no. They almost never do when I phrase it correctly.
Sure.
They let me go to the next page. Now they're really taking in this information versus those are just the crazies. I got my blinders on. I'm moving forward.
Okay. So you're still telling them, quote unquote, the truth, but you are doing it in a very specific way so that you have the relationship where they can take in that information.
Yes. I'll be telling them many of the same things. Okay, many of the AHA types are just, if we give them the truth, they'll turn. I'm going to say, the way you're saying the truth, they just don't hear you. Some people in the pro-life movement are using methods that they're just not effective because, in my opinion, they're not being heard.
Right. And this is true on the sidewalk outside the abortion clinic, and it's true on college campuses or wherever people are having discussions about abortion. There are people who they have all the arguments. They have all the facts, but they're not convincing anyone because they're not building that relationship. So it's the same thing out on the sidewalk.
Yes. I would push a little bit on that because I think that sometimes they do convince some people. I just don't think it's the most effective.
Yeah.
Sure.
I think if you're going to an abortion clinic, you could just about be doing like the dumbest thing in the world. Maybe playing tambourines really bad, and you'll convince people not to have an abortion.
Okay.
Because what pro-life people think is that someone that is going to an abortion clinic has made up their mind, it's a done deal, it's done. And I want to tell you that is absolutely not true. If we were to put them on a scale of 1 to 10, like 1 being the person who made the phone call and made an appointment, but then was like, no, I'm never following through with that. And then maybe a 3 on the scale is somebody that was driving down there and they saw a bumper sticker, which is not the best argument. And they were like, okay, that's a sign I'm not having an abortion, right?
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
Okay, we're already at a 3. Then you get to like maybe a 5 and or let's say a 4. They get there and they see some people out in front of the abortion clinic and they don't even have good signs. And they go, you know what? Somebody else thinks this is a bad idea. I just don't feel like this is right for me today, so I'm not going to do that. Then maybe you get all the way up to where you've got somebody who is determined to have the abortion at like an 8 or a 9.
Sure. That's not most people. Most people are not.
Not most people. But I'm able to have a conversation with them and they go, okay, maybe not.
Wow.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
And so people think that everybody's a 10 going in. You're not going to talk them out. It's their 5th abortion, and there's no reasoning with them. And I'm going to say most people, I don't get most people out of the abortion clinic, right? That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if you can have a good conversation with them, you'd be shocked at how many would leave.
Wow.
Yeah. I think I had that perception. I had that perception that if someone, really wanted an abortion or that was like the first thing out of their mouth, it's like, I don't know where this is going. Like, I feel like there's not really much I can do. But that has been something so surprising to me is sometimes the first thing that I'll get from a client, they'll text our text line or they'll send us an email and say, do you guys do abortions? I just took an at-home pregnancy test, figured out I'm positive. Do you guys do abortions? And so when I first read a text like that, I'm like, oh no.
Right.
This is, what am I going to do? But then most of the time I respond, I say, we don't do abortions here. These are the services that we do offer at no cost to you. We can talk about all your options and give you some information about abortion. And most of the time they come in. Wow. I think sending that text saying, we don't do abortions here, there's no way they're going to come in and actually have a chance to talk about all of their options. But most of the time they do, because that reaction that, hey, do you guys do abortions here, is just that. It's, oh my gosh, I just found out I'm pregnant. What am I going to do about that?
And as soon as they've had time to process, they're more open to getting a chance to process.
Yeah. As soon as they've had a chance to say, okay, I've made an appointment, I'm doing something about this. Okay, I can take a deep breath. We're taking steps here.
So even though you're telling them, we don't provide abortions, but we can help you with this. We can help you give some space to talk this through and see your options.
Right.
Let's set an appointment for that. You're seeing that makes them feel better already. And they're like, okay, I've done something. I'm moving in a direction forward to deal with this problem.
And they can get a little bit out of crisis mode and into, I can actually think about this mode because I'm not in panic.
That's brilliant. That's wonderful.
Wow. Exactly. And what's really important too is those, the ultrasounds that we can offer. That's something that you have to do anyway. And so we don't charge anything for our ultrasounds. And so you can get that done here for free and have time to think about it and not feel, pressured into getting an abortion or making any sort of decision.
Most abortion clinics are $175 to $275 for an ultrasound.
Wow.
And you're doing it for free.
Yeah. And a lot of our clients don't have insurance.
Right.
So that's huge.
That is huge.
Yeah.
Funny side note, in front of the abortion clinic, I'll tell people, we can get you a free ultrasound. They're going to charge you. I usually know how much the clinic's going to charge. They're $2.25 and they're $225. So they go into the clinic, and several times this has happened, they've got a $225 discount because so I'm at least taking money away from the abortion clinic. I like that. But,
wow.
Really?
Yeah, I really like that point. I want to emphasize that to people, that you being honest with them about that you don't do abortions, but you can help talk this through. And that's the switch that got them to you. And I want people to understand how delicate this process is.
Absolutely.
If you were the abortion clinic, then they would have set up an appointment to get an abortion.
Yep, absolutely.
So,
and then it would have been done.
And then, it's done.
So Thursday, I find out, I take the pregnancy test, I'm pregnant. Okay, Friday, I make an appointment with the abortion clinic. Saturday, it's done.
Right.
How much time is there to process what has just happened to you and really think about that decision?
Yeah.
There has been no time.
Right.
So if we can say, hey, a lot of times people are finding out earlier, you have time to think about this, and you really should, because oh boy, is it a big decision.
Yeah.
No matter what you do.
Right.
It's going to impact your life. So let's take more than a couple days.
Yeah, how close that edge is from them going to have an abortion versus going to you guys, and most likely not having an abortion.
Sometimes it's just the Google search engine.
Right.
Does it bring up our name when they're typing, hey, where can I make an appointment for an abortion?
Which is one of the things we love for people to do. Come have a tour.
Yep.
Go leave a Google review.
Yes.
I went in there. It was so clean. It was so nice. I was so impressed with how nice the people were. I really appreciated what they're doing, or the facility and the services they're offering. Thank you so much. You think that's not a big deal, but if you're hearing what we're talking about, how close this line is,
it's a huge deal.
You go in there, get an honest review in, and big help.
Yeah.
Wow.
And if something that you care about a lot is marketing or reaching these women, donate specifically so that PRCs can work on their marketing, so we can work on our social media, because we're a really small crew. Right now we do our own social media. We're not trained to do that. We're just doing our best. But that's how people in our age group communicate. Absolutely. You look at someone's social media, you look at their website, we evaluate, we know where we're going before we step foot in the door.
Oh yeah, I'm looking at pictures on Google Images, how
I'm reading those Google
what are the
reviews. It is so important.
Yeah.
We don't know how many abortion-minded women we're missing from coming into the center because of that search engine, because of where they're going. So it is so key to have that up to date, so that when they type in, where can I make an appointment to get an abortion, we come up.
So when you do your review, take some nice pictures.
Take some
include pictures.
Put it up on there.
Oh my gosh,
seriously.
yes.
It makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so I think I'm gonna pause us right there. We are gonna have to turn this into a part 1, part 2. I thought we were gonna get all this done, but anyone who listens to this podcast regularly knows that this happens a lot. We get really passionate about things.
I'm on the podcast, there's going to be 2.
You know what, that's a good point, Jacob. You talk a lot. So we're gonna pause it right there and turn this into a second episode. Thank you both so much for joining us, and I hope everyone who listened to this will come back and listen to part 2, because we got a lot more things to break down about pregnancy centers and what you should know and how you can really make a difference. So thank you both for being here.